Hello, my name is Frank Kwan and welcome to Schools on Point. This half hour, we'll be talking about some of the major issues impacting schools and public education here in Southern California and across the state. With me is Dr. Arturo Delgado, the Los Angeles County Superintendent of Schools. The Los Angeles County Office of Education serves 80 public school districts and 13 community colleges that educate 2.5 million students. Joining us is California State Assemblymember Sebastian Ridley-Thomas. He is chair of the Elections and Redistricting Committee and a member of the Banking and Finance and Health Committees. He also chairs the Select Committee on Mental and Behavioral Health. Mr. Ridley-Thomas is a Democrat representing the 54th Assembly District, which includes the communities of Century City, Culver City, Westwood, Mar Vista, Palms, Baldwin Hills, Windsor Hills, Ladera Heights, View Park, Crenshaw, Leimert Park, Mid-City, and West Los Angeles. Welcome, and with that, let's begin. Dr. Delgado.
You have a wealth of experience in public service, and some of those in public office have been inspired by a cause, a life experience, or their upbringing. Can you tell us what inspired you to become a public servant?
Well, it was really the legacy of service that my parents have built over many decades in Los Angeles, and working with people of like mind and their relatives, frankly. My mother is a community advocate and consumer protection fighter and a proponent of mediation at the LA City Attorney's Office for some 30 years, now teaching at UCLA and USC, so she's bipartisan. And my dad, Mark Ridley-Thomas, who now serves on the Board of Supervisors, but was previously a legislator in both houses of the California legislature, and a Los Angeles City Councilman, and before that, a grassroots civil rights activist. He pioneered the Empowerment Congress, which will turn 25 next year, and is really a grassroots community policy model that has been nationally adopted. So that's what inspired me.
Well, also, Mr. Ridley-Thomas, you have the distinction of being the youngest member of the state legislature. How has your perspective as a young person helped you as a member of the legislature?
Well, I think that it's been really immensely important to have younger voices in the legislature. The key issue affecting young people in the demographic of which I am a part is access to the economy. We do not access the economy at the same rate as our parents or our older siblings. It's estimated that someone who is in their 20s, almost to their early 30s, will have 5 types of employment prior to settling on what we would think of as a career. It's a challenge. There is an education component, there's an intervention component, in some respects there's a mental health component, but there's also an economic development and growth strategy in how we target industries that will produce the high wage, middle income, family sustaining employment opportunities while dealing with the challenges affecting the environment and the like, because those things aren't always sync. So we need to be smart on policy that creates those employment opportunities and can get our young people into those good paying careers.
Let's talk a bit beyond the very important critical economic piece, though, when it comes to youth. Because you're chair of the Committee on Elections and Redistricting, that means you consider legislation that deals with voter accessibility, campaign reporting, and redistricting, among other things. But you also talk about civic engagement.
Well, it's a huge thing. We celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act last year, and we have a significant, what we call in voting parlance or elections parlance, an undervote in Los Angeles County. The state's voting average is lower significantly because Los Angeles countywide underperforms the state average by about 20 points. It's largely driven by young people and people of color across the gamut, Asian, Latino, and African American. And for the first time in LA County, we have as many millennial age voters, so over 18, I think up to the mid-30s or early 30s, we have the same number as baby boomers, first time. And if that vote were more accentuated, I think we would see greater priorities on things like education and economic opportunity. So the ways that we help engage those folks are in partnering with the programs that the superintendent is leading, and also with early voter registration. In about a year or so, about 1 or 2 years, if you're 16 years old, you can pre-register to vote. In 5 years, there will be an automatic voter registration component to people who apply for driver's licenses. So it makes you aware of the responsibility to vote and then the obligations associated with elections. We're also trying to make elections more simple. We have a number. LA County leads the state in odd year elections. Most counties and cities in the state have even year elections, large and small cities and counties. And because we're so big and have so many different elections, it's hard to communicate on when election day is, because election day in 1 year can be 6 times in LA County. And it can be every year, and it can be quite daunting. So we feel it's our responsibility to be smarter, more simple, and much more accessible and effective in the deployment of technology.
Given the challenge that you face with the numbers that you're talking about for the undervote, do you see this as an ongoing effort? This is more than just kind of a one-time thing, right?
Without question, yes. And that's why I talked to how long some of these efforts are going to take. And we're going to need to partner with groups that can help reach their communities. So where we have the undervote the greatest in the communities of color and with young people, we're simply going to have to step up more. So educational institutions are going to be a key part of that for young people. And then community-based organizations are really going to be the engines through which we touch the Asian community, the Latino community, the African American community, to make sure that people are aware of their responsibilities, their rights, and the opportunity they have to express their opinions via the democratic process.
You're pretty engaged in the committees that you're on, which include the mental health, the health committee, and chair of the select committee on mental and behavioral health. But as a member of those committees, you've been pretty involved in introducing a lot of bills that impact young people, yes. Just what we were talking about. Yes. And in fact, I think there was a bipartisan effort to put together a mental health legislative package. And I think one of your bills, AB 1299, was part of that package?
Yes, it was, and this is one that is still a work in progress. A newly founded institute called the Steinberg Institute, which was created by a previous President Pro Tem of the California State Senate, Darrell Steinberg from Sacramento, helped craft 14 pieces of legislation that a bipartisan group of legislators carried from all parts of the state. AB 1299, which I authored and is still in the legislature, would simply allow a foster care pupil who receives mental health services through the public system to keep those benefits even if they cross county lines. And there is a fiscal cost to it, and we are in an aggressive negotiation about making sure that that happens. What we know is that if we spend mental health resources early, we can intervene and help young people have constructive and engaged and participatory experiences in their educational environments and beyond. But the challenge is that right now, just via an arbitrary decision in law many years ago, this is a 40-year-old issue. If you cross the county line, which in our region we know is very common, Southern California, we're very transient, and Northern California too. I mean, Contra Costa, Alameda, and San Francisco are all different counties. So we hope to be able to accomplish that before the end of this year's legislative session.
Assemblymember, in addition to AB 1299, you also introduced AB 766, which relates to Public School Health Center Support Program. The bill addresses the needs of some of our state's most vulnerable youth. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So AB 766 is a continuum. You asked earlier about why I got into public service. There was one thing that Supervisor Ridley-Thomas asked me when I was petitioning for his support of my candidacy. He said, Sebastian, I need a champion for school-based health centers. And I said, Dad, I'll do it. So we've been moderately successful, and we think we can go for a serious win this year to make sure that the office that he and Governor Schwarzenegger negotiated 10 years ago is fully funded to collect information on school-based health centers, and they really help eliminate disparity, reduce disparity in the delivery of health services. And those students who are in public schools suffer, unfortunately, from the greatest disparity and lack of access to quality health care. So this is huge, and this will actually make a tangible difference in the lives of children.
It sounds like it's an investment that we're making.
Without
because we
question.
talked a bit about mental health, but this is the other aspect of it too, which is the physical health, and to have something that's school-based that will help kids, when they most need it. Is that how you look at it?
I do look at it as such, and believe it or not, half the visits in such school-based health centers are related to mental health. Self-diagnose, self-analyze. If you say, hey, these services are available during the school day, some are a little bit afterwards. They're all federally qualified health centers that operate these facilities. Students often self-report. Other large proportions of health services are vision and dental, as you may recall, and a lot of all of those maladies often affect behavior pretty intensely.
Assemblymember, you actually had some pretty good timing because you joined the legislature just as our state economy began to turn around.
Yes, indeed.
Good timing. However, I also know that you were a staffer in the legislature during the worst of the recession. So you had a frontline seat on seeing what was going to happen in terms of cuts and reductions and budget issues that affected education and programs like you just talked about. So what are your thoughts about our current state budget, and potentially what other budget issues should we be looking at on the horizon type of thing, because you've had this unique opportunity to see what's happened in the past and be in a place now to influence where we're going now?
I will answer that question, but I'll tell you, when I came to the legislature in 2009 as a fellow through the Center for California Studies Capital Fellows Program in the Senate, I wasn't sure if a month or two before if we were still going to have a fellows program. It was an unfounded concern that I had that the condition of the budget was such that we were in a precarious situation. This was at a time, if you recall, when there was a proposal to have state employees go minimum wage during the budget impasse. This was the bad old days of slash and cut budgets. We are in a much different place now, largely because of the resiliency of the people of California and their willingness to make investments and smart decisions, frankly, at the federal level. The investment in the bailouts, as well as the infrastructure investments that were the stimulus, helped significantly stem the tide of the challenges that we had at the state level. In addition, the legislature made very difficult permanent cuts. State government reduced itself by roughly 20 to 25%. And then the people said, well, you've cut enough. Education, unfortunately, took heavy cuts, and we haven't fully restored all of it. And we are now in a very different place, particularly with Proposition 30. The budget outlook through the fiscal year, which runs July 1 to June 30th, is decidedly positive. I think that's a fair part of what we say. We are been very prudent with tax dollars, and we are going to roll over roughly $3.5 billion from last year, half of which will go to our rainy day fund, which is our savings account for hard times, and the other half, which roughly goes to various parts of education, early childhood, K-14, and a small bit to the California State University system and the University of California. There are risks on the horizon, though, because our sunny projections are based on the assumption that the economy will grow at a rate somewhere between 1.5 and 2% into 2019-20. And the three main sources of state general fund revenue, which are personal income tax, sales tax, and property tax, require the kind of stability that has not been common in order that we can fund the things that we are concerned about. So when you see things about surpluses and then we're talking about taxes at the same time, what we're saying is we cannot spend in ongoing programming responsibly. The reason why we are able to pay for what we can now is because the people gave us the tax authority. And it's been about $6 billion a year since 2012, Proposition 30 of 2012. That begins expiring at the end of 2017 and phases out therein. So there's a conversation now about whether or not the public has an appetite to maintain the current levels of taxation for an extended period of time. 6 to 10 years, I think, is the question. In order that we can secure those resources and pay for the essential public services that the people of California expect, a little over half of which is education of some sort.
I'm going to jump in for a second here because you brought up Prop 30. I was going to ask you about it a little bit later, but I'll ask you now. Because there is, I believe, an initiative on the November ballot for 2016. Talks about extending Proposition 30. And you've mentioned it a couple of times. The voters chose to bring in Prop 30, which were temporary taxes. And as you say, they're expiring, some this year and some, I believe, in 2018, 2017.
Yep.
And some people would say that Prop 30 was a means which we tried to look at eliminating or trying to reduce kind of the roller coaster effect that California finance has had. Would you comment on what you've seen? I think you already touched on it a bit, in terms of how has Prop 30 helped even us out somewhat and being able to
Without question, I mean, it's helped bring in the local control funding formula, which we haven't fully funded, but which is a revolutionary change in how we funded schools. So it took us from 48th in the country to 29th in the country. It's not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction. The phase-in for the full funding of local control funding formula is over an 8 or 9 year period, and the assumption therein is that we can extend the tax revenues that we currently have. Proposition 30 didn't really help with the volatility of the revenue. It was the discipline of the legislature and the governor in spending. Proposition 30 really helped with our structural deficit. The state, as currently in terms of our ongoing spending obligations and our tax system, has a $4.5 to $5 billion deficit, which represents roughly 3% of its general fund, 3 to 4% of its general fund. And the missed revenue was largely because of an artificially decreased vehicle license fee. 2004, the card tax was reduced. Governor Schwarzenegger and then the legislature decided to do that. And it has the gap between obligations and revenues is that amount. So Proposition 30 makes up for it. And if the people decide not to extend Proposition 30, we will be forced to restrain our spending because we have a constitutional obligation and fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to live within our means. And if they don't want to invest, then we will unfortunately be limited in what we can do. It sounds like big numbers, but we are a big state. There are 38+ million people in this state, and we will be at 40 million quicker than we can blink here at this time. So if we want to be the 8th largest economy, if we want to continue to be the land of golden opportunity, we have to be strategic with our investments. And that's what the extension of Proposition 30 will mean. And that's the argument that I will be making to my constituents and those who will listen.
Well, you've said a lot there. And we're very in tune to what's happening in Sacramento relative to those taxes, because naturally one of the comments that you did make was that we haven't really quite fully funded education back to what we had some years back. Nope. And educators are very aware of that, and we're trying to be responsible as well. So it's actually very refreshing, Assemblymember, to hear you speak about this in the terms that you have, because we'd like to get the feeling in education that we're all in this together. Yes. And so the cuts that are being made at the local levels for our school districts, we're watching also to see what impact that has for the future of our state and our country overall, because of course a great deal of our wonderful programs, they don't exist unless we can fund them. Yeah. Now, so, but which brings me to the question I have for you: the inevitability, or at least the possibility that the taxes will soon expire. You mentioned some of the impact on the priorities. What do you see some other priorities for the legislation should those tax dollars go away?
Well, I mean, the priorities that we won't easily be able to fund. Right. So our investments in early childhood education, where we've restored slots and the like, will be significantly undermined, unfortunately, because there are ongoing expenses. That it was difficult to, it was a rather intense negotiations. It's among the most intense that I've observed since being in Sacramento, to push the governor and the administration to allow for the restoration of subsidized child care slots and state preschool. And there were tens of thousands, down from 1 million. So this was literally a drop in the bucket, and it was hard to get that because it is extremely expensive. It's worth the investment in my mind, but from a straight, rather frankly myopic budget year perspective, it is very cost intensive to provide those services. They are essential services. They help the economy. They help working parents. They support small business. They help districts that use those programs, but they are expensive from a state general fund perspective. So they would be in danger. Even one-time expenses like infrastructure, deferred maintenance, backlog, climate investments to improve energy efficiency, workforce development programs, health care, you name it, human services, support services for the homeless population. Those are the things that make it very difficult to attempt to address those issues. And we can't move up to higher levels of funding for education if we do not invest with the extension of Proposition 30. So if that goes away, unfortunately, school funding will drop just by virtue of the dollars and resources, because the big things that the state funds are education, by far number one, health care, by far number two, transportation, prisons, and human services. That's the state spending apparatus, and the general fund is largely education, transportation, healthcare, and prisons.
Well, that was, I think you painted a really comprehensive picture about the effects that type of thing will have on the state. It'll take us back to some, I don't want to call them bad old days, but bad old days. Dr. Delgado, you had a question?
So, Assemblyman, you have been very active in your community, and your legislation reflects this passion of yours. For example, you introduced AB 446 to eliminate the expiration of the law that created the Baldwin Hills Conservancy. And what would have happened if the original law had expired?
So the Baldwin Hills Conservancy is a construction authority that builds parklands. in the Baldwin Hills area in Southwest and West Los Angeles, which is in the geographic center of the area that I represent. The things that it is most notable for having built would be the Baldwin Hills Scenic Overlook, which is among the most popular urban park spaces in the region, and the Stocker Trailhead Corridor, which was opened in the last month at the intersection of Stocker, Overhill, and La Brea. It's a multiple intersection location. It was created about 2 decades ago and is really helped reduce the parks deficit in the Southwest Los Angeles area. If the sunset that was in statute expired, it would go away. So we would have limited ability to do green infrastructure. Whereas when you have a named entity that is focused, you can build and construct park space, you can improve medians, you can improve storm water capture and recharge, you can do permeable asphalt in order to capture water during rainfall. So you can do all of those things that have economic, environmental, and aesthetic benefit. So we're excited about the legislature having agreed with us and the governor having signed that extension. So now we can continue green infrastructure in South LA.
There are a lot of things that go into that, including there's an educational component as well. I mean,
Yes.
It sounds like you're doing some innovative things
Yes.
with that conservancy, such as the permeable asphalt and this type of thing. So are there education programs that get tied into that as well?
Yeah, there are a few. There are at least 3 that come to mind. One is the Restoration Leadership Program at the Scenic Overlook that I mentioned in the Kennethon State Recreation Facility. Another is the Greenhouse Internship Program, and the third is the Resources Enrichment Program. So essentially, state parks, the Conservancy, and the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority run these programs to recruit young people, the Conservation Corps participants, and the LA and California Conservation Corps participants to improve infrastructure, learn about the natural environment, its interaction with the built environment, and nature. Some of those areas are wildlands and protected areas, and it's incumbent upon us not to lose our heritage in the natural environment, because we really do have a unique heritage, the greater Los Angeles region, with our natural heritage. So just like you see the San Gabriel Mountains becoming a protected national monument, we have areas in Southwest Los Angeles that are unique, that are sensitive, that are beautiful, and that can be tourist attractions and benefit human health through recreation and the like. So we're training the scientists of the future, and we want to invite more and more participants in such programs.
Oh, you're truly active statewide and in your own community
We're
to
trying.
bring these home. Well, there's a lot more that we could talk about today, but we've come to the end of our program. And this program is brought to you by the Los Angeles County Office of Education, a public agency dedicated to serving students, supporting communities, and leading educators. If you'd like to know more about the Los Angeles County Office of Education, you can visit us online at www.lacoe.edu. For questions, comments, or suggestions, you could email us at the address that you see on your screen. On behalf of the Los Angeles County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Arturo Delgado, and our special guest, California State Assemblymember Sebastian Ridley-Thomas, I'm Frank Kwan. Until our next Schools on Point, thank you for joining us.